What do you think higher consciousness is? Because the display is usually not on the outside, so you can't typically see it or recognize it only and to the degree that you are it, whatever consciousness frequency you're at. The old saying I like to say a lot is, it takes one to know one. And others like those with eyes to see or ears to hear, kind of thing, right? So I'm looking at these consciousness frequencies, and when it comes to, in relationships, trying to hear each other, trying to be heard from each other, and there's, without the awareness of the understanding that different frequencies of consciousness, the fuller the frequency, the higher the frequency, the fuller the frequency is. The more depth it has, the more capacity it has. So, thus, any consciousness frequency that is above us, that is being expressed to us, being given to us, being, that might be directed to us, for us, right, in any kind of capacity or way. The thing is that whatever lower frequency of consciousness that we're at, we are filtering all of that through our capacity, through because when we're at a lower consciousness, we're capped to what we can comprehend, to what we can conceive, to the truth that is. There's always a distortion of truth that is not fully enlightened and that is not fully aligned with the divine. So when especially when you're in relationships with someone that is at a consciousness level that is higher or lower than yours, and I don't even know, it's like, it's not about being good, better, right, wrong, better or worse. It's not an ego thing. It shouldn't be anyways. It's not. It's just, sometimes it's a matter of fact. It's the facts of things. And like, there's differences to be aware of. And even at a higher capacity, even at a higher degree of consciousness, when you're not really taking in consideration that the other is not at the same frequency of consciousness, then, because that could happen, right? Especially when you're in close relationship with someone, and you want to, and sometimes you don't know what you don't know, and you want to believe or think, that someone's, because usually it's like attracts like or something, but really there's lessons regardless. And, consciousness doesn't necessarily, every level of consciousness, you always have lessons. You're never going to escape that, right? So when you don't have to match consciousness levels in relationship in order to have the matching or polarized opposite matching picture that we could work on in relationships with others, right? So when you are communicating, it is very important to be aware that the lower consciousness capacity, because it is capped only to the governing laws of that universe of consciousness, okay? The entire perception of reality is capped, okay? There's a distortion happening. It's a truth at the level of consciousness frequency that it's at. But any higher level of consciousness frequency, that truth becomes not as truthful. In other words, there's a higher truth to it. There's a cleaner version. There's a because here's the thing: is that each level of consciousness, it has to hold the reality of that frequency, right? Those are universal governing laws, not going to change. So it has to maintain a certain reality at that frequency. When you're in a relationship and you're not wanting to work on yourself, you're not dedicated, devoted for your own self to learn and to evolve, you're not open, no matter what frequency you're at, what consciousness you're at, there is some switch that needs to be turned on, or it's turned off, where you just don't care to grow, you just don't care to learn, and you want to maintain your current frame, your current reality, your current truth, and you're not open to a higher dimension of frequency of truth, then you will build a perception that supports that reality, because you got no other choice, because of that one decision that you're not devoted to your own growth in consciousness in this life, possibly. It's like, that's the decision that you're making. That's how serious it is. So when you make that decision, your reality will support that 100%, which means that it's going to create a narrative where the narrative itself that is created out of that frequency just plainly can't see the higher truth. So if you're with someone that is at a higher frequency than you, and you're not committed to see the truth for yourself for growth, then when you're not, willing to look at things, then you create this hard structure that can't be pierced, this hard wall that can't be let in. In other words, if more love was being given to you, you can't receive it. It just bounces off. In fact, it doesn't even look like love. In fact, it looks like something that's not love, because you can't perceive it, you can't see it, you can't hear it, you can't know it. It's not at that frequency. It's a higher octave of love, a higher octave. Now, whatever really feeling, emotion, experience it is, but we're going with love at this point, right? Normally, you'd think relationships, you want to have a loving relationship, but yeah. So the it's not always the case, because here's the thing: is that every level of consciousness has its frame reality of what love is, and the thing is like, if you're at unless you're at the very bottom of level of consciousness. They say level 20, level of shame, consciousness of shame frequency, right? I mean, the thing is like the consciousness of shame has a degree of love. In fact, it uses shame in the name of love. That's how it does it, you know? And so its reality essentially is if I don't shame you to put you in place, I don't love you, right? I don't even care to correct you. So, and the way that I know how to do that, because I'm at the frequency of shame, for example, is I'm going to shame somebody, or, or you feel very shameful for something, and it just comes out. That energy is what's expressed. That's energy is what is experienced, is what is lived. It's the full reality. It creates this whole reality. So, but like someone that is more in anger, which is a higher frequency, it's quite a bit higher actually, still, below the integrity line. But like anger can be expressed in its loving form, right? So the way that anger might express love is justify anger as love, right? It's full capacity. It's like, well, because I love you, I'm going to show you how angry I am. That's what love does at the frequency of anger, right? And so but because anger could be a better motivator potentially than shame, and so maybe out of anger, you love your, whatever, friend, family member, child, whatever, it doesn't matter. You love them, but your frequency is, kind of angry at the world. You got an angry God view. It's like a vengeful or angry God. So it's like the whole life view is kind of angry. You're mad at this, you're mad at that. It's a higher frequency than shame, but it's anger. And so love expresses out in that frequency of anger. It can't express any higher frequency than that, right? That frequency is capped. Now, that frequency is a higher frequency than the capped of shame. So, I guess I'm saying all this because we really need to understand in relationships different levels of consciousness and how they're playing out, because it changes the entire frame of reality for each of us. And so when communication happens and people are not being understood, it seems like, or people are feeling like they're not being heard, it's usually because a difference in consciousness, in frequency, in the degree of capacity that is happening, and you're not acknowledging that difference. So what else do I want to say? People won't feel heard when that distinction is not at least aware of by whatever frequency is higher than the other, and then taken in consideration. Now, the problem is if the lower frequency just doesn't care to change, doesn't care to grow, doesn't care to heal, doesn't care to do the work, doesn't care to face the shadows, face the fears, doesn't care to do that, then the higher level of frequency probably can't maintain or remain. It would eventually probably leave anyways. But maybe because of that awareness, things could be explained differently or approached differently, and but yeah, so I don't know. There is a degree of like that switch needs to be turned on of a desire to really truly grow, heal, and learn. If that is there, then I believe the higher frequency of consciousness can get through to the lower frequency of consciousness. But it's a very tough thing to do without coming across as egotistical or whatever, higher, lower, whatever, and all that. It's really hard because the reality and communication. Well, the communication is hard to communicate the reality. You just can't do it fully. You can't communicate the reality to, from a higher frequency of consciousness to a lower frequency of consciousness, and expect the lower frequency of consciousness to hear everything that you're saying, how you're saying it, what it means, to what degree and capacity it fills. So there is a pretty big gap in that. So I don't know. I don't really know if how, I mean, obviously anybody can make anything work, I suppose, but maybe more and more these days, it's not going to work. We're going to have to find our match in frequency of consciousness for relationships to work. Otherwise, I don't know how that's going to, happen. Because there's possibilities in framing, I suppose, that could work, but why? I don't know. I'm curious, what others have realized around this in relationship and have made work or not, So feel free to let me know. All right. Much love. Hope you enjoyed.